Dr. Wiener is the US representative and senior advisor to the president of Koç University in Istanbul. Prior to assuming her current position, Dr. Wiener as a US diplomat for more than 30 years. Her most recent overseas assignment was as US Consul General and Principal Officer in Istanbul from 2007 to 2010. Earlier foreign postings included Paris, Moscow, and Cairo. In Washington, Dr. Wiener served inter alia as the Director of Jordan, Syria, and Lebanon Affairs in the State Department's Near East Bureau, as the Director of the State Department Operations Center, and as Chairman of the Foreign Service Commission and Tenure Board. From 1975 to 78, Dr. Wiener was an instructor with the University of Maryland's Overseas Division in Adana and Ankara, Turkey. Dr. Wiener.
Thank you very much, Sinan. And I would like to start out actually by congratulating both the Middle East Institute and the Institute for Turkish Studies for hosting this conference, and to thank in advance our four esteemed panelists who are here today to discuss this important subject. Let me just start out by outlining the procedure we will be following, because GNUL is very strict in terms of the rules we moderators need to follow, and I will try to stick to her rules. I will make some very brief comments to set the stage, and then I'll ask each of our four panelists in the order in which they appear in the program to speak for 12 minutes each. You have bio information in your programs. I've been asked not to go through the bios in detail, but I would like to note that we will have four panelists today. Brice Schietere from the European Commission representation here in Washington, Ambassador Robert Pearson, who is with IREX, but also served as the U.S. Ambassador to Turkey, Ambassador Ross Wilson of the Atlantic Council, and also a former ambassador to Ankara, and finally Minister Yaşar, former Foreign Minister of Turkey, and currently with the Center for Strategic Communication. So we are here to discuss the subject, Turkey, the EU, and the US, evolving partnerships post-Arab Spring. A nice, concise little topic for just a little over an hour of discussion. And we also have the disadvantage of being the panel that comes after lunch and after a wonderful tour d'horizon on the part of Ibrahim Kalın. It is therefore a little difficult to come up with anything new and different to say by way of introduction on this subject. It is true, though, as people have reiterated since first thing this morning, that Turkey has very much arrived on the world stage. As the recent Council on Foreign Relations Task Force report on Turkey stated clearly, one of the most important developments in international affairs of the past decade is the emergence of Turkey as a rising regional and global power. We are looking at a new Turkey, and this new Turkey reflects both changes in Turkey and changes in the international arena in which Turkey is operating. Obviously, these developments have significant implications for both the US and for Europe, even more so given both the historically significant developments of the Arab Spring and the economic challenges that the EU is facing right now. In terms of relations with the US, commentators frequently refer these days to a golden era in US-Turkish relations. This is true particularly in contrast with the situation a mere 2 years ago, which I remember quite vividly because I was still on post in Turkey at the time. But there has definitely, on the official government-to-government level, been a very definite improvement in relations between Turkey and the United States. I would note, though, that the situation on the economic, commercial, cultural diplomacy, and public opinion fronts still leaves much to be desired, and leaves the government-to-government relationship much more vulnerable to volatility than would be the case if the relationship all the way through the societies reflected the same golden relationship that exists currently on the government-to-government level. I would note that earlier this week, there was a meeting at the ministerial level of the FSEC, the Framework for Strategic Economic and Commercial Cooperation meeting in Turkey. This effort is, in fact, one of the many steps that's being taken to address the imbalance between the sort of strategic political relationship between the two countries and other aspects of the relationship. On the EU front, everybody knows the challenges in Turkey's EU membership process, and Ibrahim Kalin has just reviewed that quite succinctly. But EU membership is only one dimension of Turkey's relations with Europe. Perhaps it can also be helpful to look at Turkey's Europeanization and the process of its membership as distinct from the end point of membership itself. There is obviously no talk these days of Turkey turning its back on the West, as was the case several years ago. Indeed, in large measure, Turkey, in seeking a greater international and regional role, has responded to the challenges of the developments in its neighborhood and elsewhere, largely by cooperating more closely with the US and Europe. We saw that just this week. One of the first things that happened, or last week, one of the first steps Turkey took in response to the crisis with the shoot down of its plane was to approach NATO. Anyway, let me stop here and turn to our panelists to make their presentations on our panel topic. And as I said, they've been asked actually to speak from the podium to make sure that everyone can hear them. Again, they'll have 12 minutes apiece, and that should give us time at the end for some questions and answers. So first, I'd like to ask Brice de Schietere of the European Union delegation here to address us. Thank
you. Well, thank you very much, Madam Chairperson, and thank you very much to the organizers for having given me the opportunity of speaking today, and good afternoon, everyone. It's a good occasion to be speaking today from the perspective of the EU, since we have had quite a number of positive developments in the past month in our relationship. And that will be the main aim of my presentation, to highlight these developments. Perhaps starting stating the obvious, Turkey has a dynamic economy, I think it's been mentioned, an important regional role, and it continues obviously to be a key country for the European Union, and one with which we have an important strategic partnership. There are 3 points I would like to mention. First, something that everybody knows. We are negotiating Turkey's accession to the European Union. And I think you all know as well that the accession process, even though if it is central to our relationship with Turkey, has gone through a slow period recently. The second point I would want to highlight is that a new impetus was given with the launch recently of the positive dialogue, which is an expression, quotation, positive dialogue. A month ago, after on the 17th of May, our Commissioner for Enlargement and Neighbourhood Policy, Mr. Füle, was in Istanbul to launch this process. And more in line perhaps with the topic that other panelists will raise, I want also to say as a third point, which is something that not everybody perhaps knows, that the foreign policy dialogue has never been so intense between the European Union and Turkey as recently, and in the history of our relationship. That's in part due to events in the regions. That's also due to progress on the common foreign and security policy on the part of the EU, in particular with the important institutional changes we had recently. I'm actually representing now the European Union and not any longer just the European Commission, like it was the case a year and a half ago. Obviously, this intensity of our dialogue has a lot to do with growingly shared interest in the common neighborhood between the EU and Turkey. So first point, on negotiations. Perhaps a quick state of play. I know it's already been mentioned by the previous intervenant. As you all know, 3 criteria were defined in Copenhagen. It's political, economic, and also on the acquis. The negotiations on chapters of the acquis correspond to a mix of commitment, realization, and assessment at each stage of the process when chapters are open, when they are dealt with, and where they are closed. At the present time, out of 35 chapters, negotiations with Turkey have been opened on 13 chapters and closed on 1. The last chapter was actually opened in June 2010, and nothing has happened since. There are elements that were raised by the previous speaker, so I will not insist on it, and probably are related to the challenges that Turkey's accession is representing for some of our member states. Nevertheless, I want to say that there are 3 chapters, the one on public procurement, the one on competition, and the one on social policy and employment that can be open for negotiations. And these are chapters on which we're actually waiting to see Turkey delivering perhaps more so that we can fit and feel ready for the opening of these chapters. And there are 8 chapters or so that cannot be open until actually we can resolve with Turkey the question of Turkey opening up its ports and airports to goods from Cyprus in accordance with the customs union that Turkey and the EU are enjoying together. And I have to say here that we believe in the EU that progress towards full implementation of this additional protocol would give a new boost to accession negotiations with several new chapters that could be open and perhaps even a number of chapters that could be closed. Now, the question since 2010, as I said, is that we have been through a certain period of stalemate. So in this context, the question that was raised to us and to our Turkish friends was how to keep this accession process of Turkey alive and put it properly back on track. So that's where comes the second development I wanted to mention today, which is a positive agenda that Commissioner Füle and his interlocutor, Mr. Bakis, agreed on in May. That positive agenda actually is a concept that aims to build on close relations and interdependence in several areas between Turkey and the European Union. The idea there is to achieve concrete steps forward in a number of areas of joint interest where room for progress exists and which at the same time can help Turkey get better aligned and better prepared for accession. These areas were a number of 8 areas of joint interest that have already been identified and are part of this dialogue under the positive agenda. These are political reforms in Turkey. That's one of the first fundamental elements in relation in particular to the political criteria. There's a general question of the alignment with the acquis. There's visa, and I'll come back later on that with the good news. Mobility and migration, energy, trade, the foreign policy dialogue, which is a point I will develop also later, counter-terrorism, and the further participation of Turkey in EU programs. That's important to say that the positive agenda is not a substitution for, but it's a support and it's a complement to the accession process. It's actually based on a pragmatic approach. It's based on a joint understanding of mutual constraints between Turkey and the EU. So it offers actually an avenue that we hope will allow us to go ahead. And probably if we strongly believe it can on both sides, then results will certainly follow, and that will be to the benefit of all. Concretely speaking, how does it work? Working groups are formed between Turkish and EU officials, and this working group are looking at how to achieve further progress on alignment in the areas identified. So the first one actually started with, sorry to be so technical, but on chapter 23, and with 3 main areas under this chapter, which is chapter covering questions of fundamental rights and so on. So the 3 elements were on fundamental rights, judiciary, and anti-corruption, and this first meeting happened, therefore, on the 17th of May, as I mentioned. I want also to say here, in particular, that within the realm and with the momentum created by the positive dialogue, we could achieve quite a substantial progress last week. And on June 21st, the Council decided in its conclusions, the European Council, to develop cooperation with Turkey in the areas of justice and home affairs, in particular, opening way for the European Commission to negotiate a visa liberalization agreement. That's a major step forward, and the EU also welcomed the subsequent immediate initialing of the admission agreement with Turkey. So on that basis, another fundamental element of our new relationship or renewed relationship with Turkey in the past months is the development of our foreign policy dialogue.